Hello everybody, my name is Manuel and welcome to another Eternal news video. So we just had the downtime is finished. We got the new patch with the Azindel's Ways promo cards and a pretty big change. And there's another thing that I want to draw your attention to after we went over the patch notes, so stick around after for some nice PSA. Alright, so first we got these three new cards. The first card is Azindel the Wayfinder. Azindel costs 4 power, requires double shadow, double time influence, is a 0/5, and basically does the same thing as Initiate of the Sands. It adds 1 maximum power, but unlike Initiate of the Sands, whenever a unit dies, be it one of yours or an opposing unit, you get another maximum power. So basically this is like an 0/5 blocker that if there's stuff dying or you kill stuff with your shadow removal, which you most likely will be playing if you have this card in your deck, you ramp up even higher. Among others to Azindel's own gift, for example. I gotta say, I'm not sure how to feel about this card. Currently I'm not particularly excited about it, simply because an 0/5 is not too exciting. I mean, it's like an okay blocker, but the problem is like it only ramps you from like 4 to 6, which is okay because it allows you to say go turn 5 Mystic Ascendant or turn 6 Mystic Ascendant plus trigger, like 1 turn earlier than normal. But another thing to keep in mind is this card is extremely vulnerable to silence. Like if this gets silenced, you're left with like a 0/5, which is super like weak, unlike a lot of other cards that when they get silenced they still at least have like a solid body. But the 0/5 really is just like a dump wall that doesn't even like stop everything. Like it doesn't stop a Sandstorm Titan, it doesn't stop deadly units. It's just like really low impact once the ramp is gone, and even the ramp is not that like impactful, simply because jumping from 4 to 6 doesn't get you that much anymore. Sure, it gets you quicker to cards like Azindel's Gift or Mystic Ascendant, but these are already like the top of your curve anyway. And I'm not sure how much it is worth to just ramp it to them that late, 1 turn earlier, with a card that has so little impact otherwise. I just simply don't like the card, and I wouldn't know a deck I would want to put it in. I think it's like not a great card. If you have like different opinions or different ideas of what to do with it, let me know. I'm all ears. Currently I wouldn't know what to do with the card. I think the card is like pretty weak. Next we have Redraw Horror Operative, another 4-drop, another double influence card, like double primal, double justice in this case, because it's a horror card. And the stats are 2/4, and if he, let me check actually, just had to double check to not say something wrong. If he is equipped with a weapon, like if he gets a weapon attached to him, he gains Aegis, which is nice. And I think the way it works, it should be like every weapon renews his Aegis, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not entirely sure. If he can like regain Aegis once he has it and like lost it but still has the keyword, because he still has the keyword. But I think it should work the way that every weapon like renews the Aegis, which is nice. And like one of the better weapons to put on him is Elder's Feather, simply because he doesn't have any evasion and is only a 2/4, so getting evasion on it while also getting Aegis on it is a pretty big deal. And the other ability is, whenever you play a spell, he gains double damage until end of turn, which is really nice with cards like Finest Hour in particular, since suddenly that makes him like a 5 strength double damage unit, plus potential like strengths that he has from whatever weapon he's using. Like say with the Elder's Feather, he hits for 12 in the air, which is a pretty big deal. Like this card goes pretty well into this like Horu aggressive deck that has been floating around, and might make this a more relevant deck and also less centered around like Oathbook, and give it like some more play and some more flexibility. And yeah, the card is definitely interesting. It's like not super great or anything, but it's definitely a card that has some strengths to it and has some interesting things going on and is worth toying around with. I might try and like brew up a version of this Horu deck and see how it goes, or maybe even like consider it in like the Comparison Voltron type deck that I was using, since Accelerated Evolution also makes for a really nice card with him, since you can give it like evasion or endurance, and it also triggers the double damage part of his ability, but given his restrictive cost, he might be better suited for a 2-faction deck rather than 3-faction deck, since his requirements are pretty heavy. But yeah, overall an interesting card and definitely worth exploring, unlike, in my opinion, Azindel, which just actually has really great artwork and looks really cool, but I think the card itself just looks pretty poor for what it does. And last but not least, we have a Arcanum Monitor, in this case a 5-drop. It's a 1/1 Overwhelm that gets +1/+1 for each unit we control, and gives each of our units +1/+1 for as long as it is in play and isn't silenced. So it's like not like unlock potential or anything. It's not like a permanent +1/+1. It's just like they have +1/+1 as long as the monitor is around. It costs 5 power and double time, double fire influence. So it's a Praxis card. The double requirements are a little less problematic on a 5-drop than on a 4-drop. So a bit easier to hit reliably, and this card basically goes perfectly in the Praxis token deck that I have been covering in an earlier video series, so make sure to check that out. This card is like a perfect fit for it. I would probably cut the 2 General Isalios, 1 unlock potential and like a Flame Blast probably, to fit for a Arcanum Monitor for starters, and try him out, see how he does. He's pretty vulnerable to silence, but other than that he seems pretty powerful, and the Overwhelm is a nice touch to make sure he doesn't get stalled out too easily. And he has a lot of synergy with like the token theme that Praxis seems to have going on, so that's sweet. Another like nice card, or that only has like appeal in 1 archetype, but it goes perfectly into that 1 archetype and might push that from like a solid tier 2 deck to maybe like a decent tier 1 deck. We'll see, because getting some extra like punch and card quality in there definitely helps the archetype. And next we have like a super big change. The Redraw system just got completely overhauled basically. So the way it works now is the first hand already has like criteria set basically. So our initial opening hand can no longer be 7 power or 0 power. So all opening hands now are ranging from 1 to 6 power, which is nice. Like it makes the first hand a lot better already. And the redraw got changed from getting a hand that randomly consists of 2 to 5 power and the client just redrawing until it hits the first hand that has 2 to 5 power, which basically makes it dependent on like the power count in the deck. We now get 2, 3 or 4 power equally distributed, so we have a 33% chance to get 2 power, 33% chance to get 3 power, and 33% chance to get 4 power. Independent of deck, independent of power count in the deck, and it probably will also no longer basically draw hands until one of those criteria is hit, because that would like not work with the evenly distributed percentage. So I would assume the client like randomly determines maybe whether you get 2, 3 or 4, and then randomly draws like the rest of the hand from the deck or something, from like the non-power cards in the deck or something. Not entirely sure how it works. I think it's not like exactly explained how this like works technically now. So yeah, that is like a pretty big and interesting and confusing change, I guess, to me, since I don't know exactly what it means now for like deck building. One thing it definitely means is the average power amount that you get in from a redraw is 3 power, which is great because almost like most decks want like at least 3 power in their opening hand. Like even decks like Recano slightly prefer, at least I do, to have 3 power opening hands over 2 power opening hands, while in all the slower decks I definitely prefer having 3 power hands. So for like the slower decks, the redraw is great. Like having basically almost 67% chance to get 3 or 4 power in your opening hand is great, because these 2 power opening hands are pretty dreaded with decks like this, which is why it's usually nice that you have like some spell-based power sources, so you still get like these, before got like these 2 power hands with like a Seek power or a Favor, so you still have virtually like 3 power plus, which is nice because if these decks like get stuck on 2 power for like a turn or two, that usually spells disaster and a loss. So it's like a great change for these decks, and it is also has potential deck building implications for aggressive decks. Like it might very well be the case that with this change, Recano no longer needs or wants to run 28 power anymore, because the deck basically wants to hit 4 power every game, but not really more. And now you have a pretty good chance to already accomplish that with the redraw, like having an average of 3 power with Recano and eventually like finding 1 more power over the like next 4 turns. Sounds great. So it is very possible that now it is actually, unlike before, correct to run 25 or 26 power Recano, maybe even lower the curve, maybe cut the plates entirely, play the deck as like topping out at 4, playing like even more than the 2 agents that True Dawn and I used to run, maybe go up to the full 4, and maybe add like some Groundwatch cavalries and just don't run any 5 drops anymore and run like 25 or 26 power. So since you then reduce the chance to get that 5th power, but you won't need it anymore because you have like these super reliable 3 to 4 power draws where your deck operates great and doesn't flood much. It is possible that you still can run like 25, 26 with like 2 plates, and it's still worth it to run the plates. I'm not sure, would have to see. But yeah, it seems a bit like this change could be exploitable by decks that like peak at like 4 power, because they now can just run like the minimum amount of power and easily hit their peak of 4 pretty reliably by turn 4 or 5. While I don't think it changes much for like in terms of deck building for the slower decks with higher power amounts, I think they still basically need to run the same amount of power. Maybe they can like go down 1 power or something, but since the redraw at max guarantees you like 4 power and an average of 3, you still need to hit like that 4th, 5th, 6 power if you're a mid-range deck that tops at 6 naturally, and you don't want to run too few power cards in your deck to like make sure that you can like draw into enough power off the top of your deck after your opening hand. But it's definitely nice for the decks that run like 25 actual power and the rest in like favors and seeks, because you get a lot more like early consistency. You can maybe like go down 1 power card in total and have like a more consistent, smoother power development. So right now I'm not entirely sure how this affects everything, and like if all decks benefit from it equally, and if not, which benefits more, like the aggro decks, because they can now run very greedy power bases and play less than they would normally need to, or just like the mid-range decks, because they are less likely to stumble, can slightly reduce the power to not flood too much, while basically having a much more consistent early game development and punish the aggro decks, or if both is true and it's just basically improving everything across the board, which is very possible since we would expect Direwolf to have intensively tested this change and like thought about all the ins and outs of it. So yeah, it is very possible that this just simply increases quality all over the place across the board, and it is also possible that it doesn't actually change much for deck building and just increases like the performance of decks, but you still basically need to build the decks the same way you used to. But I would assume that it at least impacts the deck building in a slight way. Like for example, I definitely think like a mid-range deck that would maybe have ran like 33 power before with like 4/6 drops to make sure that it doesn't like screw and gets all its color requirements and stuff, can maybe now safely play 32 power sources and be fine and even be more consistent across the board compared to before. And yeah, I can definitely see that at least a lot of decks can go down like that one save power, but only, to be fair, the decks and people that hadn't been skimping on their power counts anyway and were running it safe before can now like maybe go down to like the lower end of the necessary amount rather than being like at a safe conservative point. Like for example, my 3 to 4/6 drop mid-range decks tended to run on like 33 power, especially with like monuments and favors, and now maybe they can go down to 32 again, thanks to this change, and operate smooth enough. We will see. I'll have to see how this like feels in practice, how this plays out. But yeah, it's definitely a pretty big change, and I'm curious to see how it feels, how it plays out. Alright, next I'll want to draw your attention to a public service announcement over some really great tool that Lupus, among others, came up with, and it's called the Eternal Stat Tracker V2.0. As you can see, it's a Reddit post by Lupus84. I will link that Reddit post in the description of the video, of course, so you can check it out yourself. And I will also quickly show you the tracker. It's like a Google and Excel sheet, like a very, very sophisticated one with a lot of scripts and stuff that does a lot of stuff for you automatically to track both your ranked games and your draft games. Let me show you real quick. This is the Google Drive version. This is the constructed one. You have like the archetypes here, and you have a lot of stats going on, and this is where you input your game, so you only have to input these parameters for every game that you play and then just submit them basically. This is all the games you played, and then you can select by deck you played, and it's stats and like daily stats. There's so many stats going on, it's great. It's like a incredible analytical tool. It's still missing like 1 or 2 features that they're working on implementing. Like for example, there's no selection for like overall win percentage. Like you can't check how your win percentage overall is with all your archetypes. You can only filter by like single archetype rather than all archetypes together, for example. And I think you also can't filter by like date. So like for example, for a specific day across all archetypes and stuff like that. That stuff would be nice to see, and they said they are working on it for the future. But other than that, this is great. This is like exactly what I wanted, what I've been looking for. It's the perfect tracking tool so far. Like the only thing that would be better basically would be like an app that automatically tracks all that stuff for you, which we might see at some point in the future if someone programs it. But until then, this is by far the best thing to have, and I can only recommend it to everyone and try it out that wants like sophisticated data generation and tracking of their progress and their performance. And here's the same for draft. It's pretty great too. You input like your color or faction combination, potential splash, even like all the stats you get, and you get basically like a poker style sit and go return of investment analysis where you basically have like an idea of your net gold winnings for drafts and like your win rate and stuff, and which faction combination, which archetypes you're doing best with in draft, and which ones you're doing worst with and everything. It's like incredibly great to analyze your draft performance and like draft in general, because you get a good idea of which factions might be like the weakest, which might be the strongest, or which are at least like the weakest for you, and where you should maybe try to like reconsider the way you draft and play them and stuff like that. It is pretty amazing. As you've seen, I barely have done any draft since I found this, so there's only one mediocre draft in there. But yeah, this is great, and I'm gonna link to Lupus' video up here, where he explains both sheets in depth and shows you how to use them properly. So I'll leave that to him. Check out his YouTube video on the trackers. It's a pretty comprehensive video. After that, you know everything you need to know to properly use those sheets, those tables. I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's like a great tool that did a great job. Lupus and the guys that helped him work on it, like who were the other guys? Zeka the Beast and Baus 1927. They helped him incorporate some features and stuff. So make sure to check that out. This is great stuff. Here's the introduction video. I'm gonna link it up here in the card for you to check out. Alright, that's it for today's Eternal News. As usual, don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this interesting or helpful, and follow me on social media for more frequent updates. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye!